She burned the letter the moment she read it. Then she climbed onto the stagecoach anyway, because a woman with nothing left had no reason to turn back. If this story already has your heart, hit that subscribe button right now and follow Amelia's journey all the way to the end. And drop a comment below. Tell me what city you're watching from. I want to see just how far this story has traveled. The letter had been folded and unfolded so many times that the creases had gone soft, the ink blurring at the edges, where Amelia Carter's fingers had pressed too hard, too often during the 3 weeks she had spent preparing for this journey. She had read it in the cramped back room of her aunt's boarding house in Cincinnati, sitting on the edge of a cot that groaned under her weight every time she shifted. She had read it by candlelight and by morning sun, had traced the handwriting with her fingertip, as though the pressure of her touch might reveal something the words themselves were not saying. Mr. Calvert Webb, rancher, Prosperity Creek, Colorado Territory. Seeking a wife of practical nature. Must be capable, willing to work, and accustomed to hardship. Correspondence welcomed. She had answered that advertisement with the most honest letter she had ever written in her life. She did not pretend to be delicate. She did not mention her size, but she did not hide from it either. She told him she could cook, garden, manage household accounts, tend livestock, and stretch a dollar further than most women twice her age. She told him she had spent 25 years being useful to other people, and that she was ready to be useful to someone who might one day be useful to her in return. He had written back within 2 weeks. The letter was short and businesslike, which she appreciated. He gave her the name of the territory, the county, the road, and the ranch. He told her the stagecoach line ran to within 4 miles of his property, and that he would send someone to meet her on the 15th of June. She had read that letter until she nearly memorized it. She had sold the only piece of jewelry she owned, a small pearl brooch that had belonged to her mother, to purchase the stagecoach ticket. She had packed everything she owned into one battered leather suitcase and said goodbye to her aunt without crying, because she had decided some time ago that she was finished crying over things she could not change. The journey took 11 days. 11 days of dust and heat, and the particular misery of being a large woman wedged between 2 strangers on a bench seat, designed for people of considerably smaller dimensions. 11 days of stopping at relay stations that smelled of horse sweat and burned coffee, of sleeping upright, with her head tipped against the window frame, of watching the landscape change from river valley to open plain to the raw, enormous sky of the Colorado Territory. She arrived on the 14th of June, 1 day early. The stagecoach rolled to a stop at the crossroads station, which was nothing more than a wooden post, a hitching rail, and a hand-painted sign that read, Prosperity Creek, 4 miles. The driver helped her down with the kind of exaggerated effort that men sometimes applied to women of her size, bracing himself as though he expected her weight to pull them both into the dirt. She stepped down without his help in the end, because she had learned long ago that accepting that kind of assistance only made things worse. Somebody meeting you, miss? The driver asked, already climbing back up. Tomorrow, she said. I'm a day early. Station keeper'll let you wait inside. He said it without looking at her, clicked his tongue at the horses, and the coach rolled away in a cloud of pale dust. She stood in the road for a moment, her suitcase at her feet, and looked in the direction the sign pointed. 4 miles. She had walked further than that before. She picked up her suitcase and started walking. The road to Prosperity Creek wound through brush and dry grass and the occasional stand of cottonwood that offered almost no shade at all. By the time Amelia saw the first fence line, her dress was damp at the back, and her feet had found every stone on that road through the thin soles of her traveling boots. She passed a gate with a name burned into the crossbeam. Dawson Ranch. She stopped, pulled the letter from her pocket, read it for what must have been the 100th time. Calvert Webb, Prosperity Creek Road. The gate said Dawson. She looked back down the road. Then she looked at the gate. Beyond it, not a quarter-mile distant, she could see the roof of a ranch house, the dark shape of a barn, the movement of cattle in a far field. She folded the letter and put it away. Perhaps Dawson was a neighbor. Perhaps the properties shared a road. The practical thing to do was to go to the house and ask. She was tired, she was hot, and she needed water. She pushed open the gate and walked up the path. William Dawson heard the gate before he saw her. He was on the near side of the barn, working a length of rusted wire off a fence post that had been leaning at a dangerous angle since the spring thaw. He was deep in it, boots braced in the dirt, pliers biting down jaw set, when the iron latch of the gate rang out in the still afternoon air. He straightened and looked. A woman walking up his path. She was carrying a suitcase, which meant she hadn't wandered in by accident. She moved with a kind of deliberate steadiness he'd learned to associate with people who had come a long way and intended to go further. He set his pliers on the fence post and walked toward her. She saw him coming and didn't stop walking. They met somewhere in the middle of the yard near the old watering trough, and she looked him directly in the eye with the kind of expression that said she was too tired for anything but honesty. "Good afternoon," she said. "My name is Amelia Carter. I'm looking for the Webb Ranch, Calvert Webb. I believe I may have followed the wrong road." Will looked at her for a moment, looked at the suitcase, looked back at her face, which was, he noticed despite himself, a genuinely pretty face, round and warm with dark eyes that didn't waver. "You're not on the wrong road," he said. "You're on the wrong property. Webb's land is another 2 miles north." Something moved through her expression. She didn't let it become anything visible, but he saw the shift, the brief internal calculation of a person deciding how to absorb disappointing news without making a scene of it. "I see," she said. "Thank you. I'll continue on." "It's coming on to 4 o'clock, he said. "Sun'll be low in 2 hours. "I know," she said. "I'll be there before dark." She said it with such perfect certainty that he almost believed her. Then he looked at the suitcase again. It was heavy. The way she was carrying it told him that the slight lean of her shoulder, the line of muscle in her forearm. She'd been carrying it for a while. "How far did you walk?" he asked. "From the crossroads station." "That was 4 miles. He looked at her more carefully now. "You want water before you go." She looked at him for a moment, deciding he sensed whether the offer came with any conditions attached. Then she set her suitcase down beside the trough. "Yes," she said. "Thank you." He pumped the handle, and she drank from the ladle he offered, and he pretended to look at something on the far fence while she did it, because he'd been raised to give people privacy for the things they needed. When she straightened and handed the ladle back, she said, "I appreciate the kindness. I won't keep you from your work." "Miss Carter," he said. She paused. "Webb's not there," he said. She turned to face him fully. "I beg your pardon. Calvert Webb. He sold the property 2 months ago, moved to Denver. The ranch is sitting empty." He watched her face do something complicated. It lasted about 3 seconds, and then it was gone, replaced by that same steady expression she'd come in wearing. "He sold," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "And you know this with certainty?" "He's my second cousin. I helped him load the wagon." The silence stretched between them. A horse moved in the barn. Somewhere out in the field, a cow called once and fell quiet. "He wrote me a letter," she said. Her voice was even and quiet, but something underneath it had gone very still. 11 days ago, he told me to come. He gave me this road, this county, this territory." She paused. "He told me someone would meet me tomorrow." Will took off his hat and turned it slowly in his hands. He didn't have anything to say that would make that better, so he didn't try. "I sold my mother's brooch for the ticket," she said. She said it to herself as much as to him, like a woman taking stock of a situation that had just changed beyond her management. Then she looked up at him again. "How much is the fare back to Cincinnati?" he told her. She closed her eyes for just a moment, then opened them. "I don't have that," she said. "Not even close." Chet, his hired man August, was in the kitchen when Will came back through the door. August was 63 years old, had worked this ranch for 11 of those years, and had the specific talent of knowing when something had happened without being told. He looked at Will. Then he looked past Will to the window, where Amelia Carter was sitting on the bench beside the front steps, her suitcase at her feet, her hands folded in her lap. "Who's that?" August said. "Woman who came a long way to the wrong place," Will said. He went to the stove and poured himself a cup of coffee that was 2 hours old and drank it without tasting it. Webb's correspondent. She didn't know he was gone. August made a sound that conveyed a great deal without any words. "She's got no money for the return fare," Will said. "Where's she supposed to sleep?" Will didn't answer. August turned and looked out the window again. "She looks tired." She walked 4 miles from the crossroads with a full suitcase. "Lord Almighty." August shook his head slowly. "You going to feed her?" "I don't know what I'm going to do." "Well, you better figure it out before it gets dark," August said. "Because that woman is not leaving this yard tonight, and you know it, and we both know it, and she probably knows it too." Will set his coffee cup down. He stood at the window for a moment and looked at her. She hadn't moved. She was sitting very straight with the particular posture of a woman who had decided she was not going to feel sorry for herself regardless of what happened next. He went back outside. She heard his boots on the steps and looked up. "Miss Carter," he said, "I have a room. It's small and it's clean and it's yours tonight at no cost. Tomorrow we can sort out the practical problem." She looked at him steadily. "What does sort out mean exactly?" "It means I'll help you figure out how to get where you need to go. And if where I need to go is not somewhere I'm able to go right now." He hadn't expected her to say it that plainly. He found to his own surprise that he respected it. "Then we'll figure that out too," he said. She was quiet for a moment. Then she picked up her suitcase and stood. "I want to be clear about something," she said. "I'm not asking for charity. If I stay here even one night, I will work for it. I'll cook, clean, mend, whatever needs doing. I don't accept things I haven't earned." "All right," he said. "I mean it." "I can see that," he said. "I believe you." She made dinner that night. Will had told her it wasn't necessary, and August had seconded it with some enthusiasm, because August's enthusiasm for cooking was limited, and the state of the kitchen reflected that. But she had said she wanted to, and the way she said it made it clear that this was not negotiable. She found bacon and dried beans and the remains of a bag of cornmeal and 3 eggs that were just on the edge of still being good. She found dried herbs hanging near the window that she suspected August had put up more out of habit than intention. She found a cast-iron skillet that hadn't been properly seasoned in what looked like years. She went to work. Will sat at the table and tried to read a month-old newspaper and found that he couldn't keep his eyes on the page. She moved efficiently. No wasted steps. She had the instinct of someone who had cooked in small spaces with insufficient supplies and had learned to make do without making a production of it. August sat across from Will and did not even pretend to read anything. He just watched her, and then looked at Will, and then looked away with the expression of a man who is enjoying a situation he intends to say nothing about. "You're from Ohio," Will said, because the silence had started to feel like something that needed filling. "Cincinnati," she said without turning around. "Born there. Lived there my whole life." A pause. "Until now, I suppose?" "You got family there. An aunt. We're not particularly close." She was quiet a moment. "She'll be relieved I'm gone, honestly. I've been an inconvenient presence in her house for 2 years." He didn't know what to say to that, so he said, "She sound it." She turned and looked at him over her shoulder, and for a second he thought she might take offense. Then the corner of her mouth moved just slightly. "She is," she agreed. August ate 2 helpings and pushed back from the table with the expression of a man who has been reminded what food can actually taste like. "Miss Amelia," he said, "I'm going to say something forward and you can take it however you like." "Go ahead," she said. "That is the best meal that has come out of this kitchen in 4 years." "The bar was low," she said. "It was," he agreed seriously. "It surely was, but you cleared it by a country mile." She smiled, then a real one, and Will noticed it the way you notice sunlight coming through a window you'd stopped expecting. He showed her to the spare room after supper. Small, clean, a single bed, a window that looked out toward the barn. August had apparently gone ahead while they were finishing the dishes and put fresh linens on the bed, which Will noted without comment. "Thank you," she said. She stood in the doorway with her suitcase and looked at the room with the expression of someone who is practicing not wanting things too much. "If you need anything in the night, August's room is at the end of the hall," Will said. "I'm in the loft above the barn." She turned and looked at him. "You sleep in the barn." "I like it," he said. "Quiet." She considered this. "That's either very peaceful or very lonely," she said. He put his hat back on. "Probably both," he said, and went back down the stairs. Jamshad. She was up before dawn. Will came in from the barn at first light and found coffee already made and the sound of movement in the kitchen. She had her back to him, working bread dough on the floured board. Her sleeves rolled up, her dark hair pinned back from her face. She heard him. "There's coffee," she said without turning around. "August mentioned you take it black." "He's right." He poured a cup and stood at the table. "You didn't have to do this." "I know I didn't have to," she said. "I wanted to." She worked the dough in silence for a moment. Then, "I also noticed your irrigation line is failing. The one running to the east field. There's a split in the pipe near the second post. You can see where the ground is wet in a line and then just stops. If it goes completely, you'll lose water pressure to the whole eastern section." He set down his coffee cup. He had been meaning to look at that irrigation line for 3 weeks. He knew something was wrong. He just hadn't had time, or hadn't made time, which was a different problem entirely. "You noticed that on your walk-in yesterday," he said. "I notice things," she said simply. He was quiet for a moment. "The barn roof's got a section going soft on the west side. Fence along the south pasture's got 2 posts that'll come down in the first real wind. The kitchen garden's not going to survive the heat without better shade cloth. And I've got cattle records going back 4 years that I haven't entered into the ledger because I hate the ledger." She turned around and looked at him. "I can do all of that," she said. "Miss Carter, I'm not doing it for charity," she said, and her voice was not unkind, but it was very certain. "I'm doing it because I need time to figure out what comes next, and I will not sit in a room and eat your food and contribute nothing. That is not who I am. So if you're going to let me stay a few more days while I sort out my situation, then you're going to have to let me work." He looked at her for a long moment. She looked back at him with that same direct, unbudging steadiness. "All right," he said. "All right," she said, and turned back to her bread. The news that Will Dawson had a woman staying at his ranch reached Prosperity Creek by noon. In a territory where information traveled faster than horses, this was not surprising. What was surprising, or perhaps not surprising at all, depending on your view of small frontier communities, was the particular shape the news took by the time it arrived in town. By the time it reached the general store, she was a city woman who'd gotten herself lost. By the time it reached the barber, she was Webb's intended, who'd shown up a month late. By the time it reached the parlor of Mrs. Dorothea Hale, who functioned as the social conscience of Prosperity Creek, whether anyone had asked her to or not, the story had acquired additional details of uncertain origin. "I heard she's enormous," said Gertrude Pruitt. Nell Fowler's husband saw her walking up the Dawson Road and said she was the biggest woman he'd ever laid eyes on. "Poor Will," said someone else. "Poor Calvert Webb is what I say," Gertrude said. "Imagine crossing the country for a woman like that." "Calvert's in Denver," Mrs. Hale said, which put an end to that particular line of sympathy. She smoothed her gloves. "Still, Will Dawson with a woman in his house." She paused. "That's something." She had been on the ranch 4 days when the Harper brothers came. She was in the kitchen garden when she heard the horses. 3 men rode in through the gate with the ease of people who'd done it before, without being invited. She went to find August. "Harper boys," August said from just inside the barn door. His voice was careful. "Cole, Rance, and Tucker. They run cattle on the North Range. Sometimes they come around when they think Will's not here. Is Will here? No, ma'am. Rode out to the south pasture an hour ago. She looked at the three men who had dismounted and were standing in the yard with the particular ease of men accustomed to making themselves comfortable in spaces that didn't belong to them. She walked toward them, because standing still and hoping they'd go away had never worked for anyone. "Can I help you?" she said. Cole Harper, the oldest, by the deference of the other two, looked her over with the slow, deliberate assessment of a man who doesn't bother to conceal what he's doing. His brothers grinned, and not pleasantly. "Well," Cole said, "I heard Will had taken in a stray." "I'm a guest," she said. "Miss Amelia Carter. Mr. Dawson is in the south pasture. You're welcome to wait." "We'll wait," Cole said. He was still looking at her in that same way. "You Webb's girl. I had correspondence with Mr. Webb, yes. And he didn't want you, so now here you are." He said it with the particular satisfaction of a man who knows he's being cruel and considers that a point in his favor. She had heard worse. She had been hearing worse her whole life. Cruelty like this wanted a reaction, because a reaction was proof that it had landed. The most devastating thing she could do was to not give him one. Waiting for Mr. Dawson would mean standing over there, she said, and nodded toward the shade beside the barn. "I need to get back to work." She turned and walked back to the garden. Behind her, she heard Tucker Harper say something to his brother, low and laughing. She didn't hear the words. She didn't need to. She knelt back down in the dirt and kept her face very still, and she did not let her hand shake. Will came back to find the Harper brothers waiting in the yard. He knew before he'd even dismounted that something had happened. It was the particular quality of the stillness, the specific shape of a situation that has been managed but has not been resolved. He looked at Cole. "Harper. Dawson. Thought we'd come check in on that grazing agreement." "We've got no grazing agreement," Will said. "You're running cattle on my north fence line again." "Just moving through. Move through somewhere else." He tied his horse to the rail. "You need to water before you ride." It was a dismissal, and Cole knew it. He took it the way men like Cole Harper always took things, with a smile that said this wasn't over, and swung back into the saddle. "Nice place you're keeping," Cole said, turning his horse. "New help and everything." He glanced toward the garden where Amelia was still working, head down, steady. "Interesting choice, Will." "Good afternoon, Cole," Will said. After they rode out, Will stood in the yard for a moment. Then he walked to the garden. She heard him coming and looked up. Her expression was composed. Whatever she was feeling, she had it where she wanted it. "They say something to you?" he asked. "Nothing I haven't heard before," she said. "That's not an answer." "Nothing worth repeating," she said. "Are they going to be a problem for you?" He looked in the direction they'd ridden. "The Harpers have been a problem for a long time. That's not your doing." "I know it isn't," she said without defensiveness. "Just clarity. I'm asking because if my presence here creates a problem for you with your neighbors, I need to know that." He looked at her. The late afternoon sun was on her face, and she was watching him with that same direct attention she gave to everything. "My neighbors' opinions are not my concern," he said. "They should be a little," she said. "You have to live here long after I'm gone." He didn't have an answer to that. He picked up the empty water pail she'd left beside the garden bed and carried it back to the pump for her, and she followed him without saying anything further, and that felt oddly like an agreement. August found Will on the porch that evening watching the sun go down. "She fixed the irrigation line today," August said. Will looked at him. "While you were in the south pasture, found the split, dug it out, repaired the coupling with materials from the supply shed. Water's running clean to the east field." Will was quiet. "She also oiled the hinges on the barn door that have been screeching for 6 months. August said, reorganized the tack room and spent an hour looking at the cattle ledger. She say anything about the ledger. She said she could have it current in 2 days. Said she'd need to ask you some questions about the recording system, but that the errors were mostly transcription. August paused. She cried in the supply shed this afternoon, about 10 minutes. Then she stopped, washed her face at the pump, and went back to work on the irrigation pipe. Will turned to look at him. I didn't mean to hear it, August said with dignity. But I was in the shed. There was a long silence between them. She deserves better than what Webb was offering, Will said mostly to himself. She deserves better than she's been settling for her whole life, August said. But that's her business to figure out, not ours. He went inside. Will stayed on the porch until the red had faded to gray, and the lamp in the kitchen window burned steadily against the dark. The letter from St. Louis arrived on the 8th day. Amelia read it at the kitchen table, while August pretended to sharpen a knife that was already sharp. Her face did not change as she read it, but when she folded it and set it down, her hands rested flat on the table in a way that looked like someone holding themselves very still on purpose. Good news, August said. My cousin says she'd be glad to have me, Amelia said. She says I can help with the children and with the household. She'll pay my fare from Prosperity Creek. That's good, August said carefully. Yes, Amelia said. She looked at the letter. It is good. August put down the knife. Miss Amelia, I've been around long enough to know the difference between someone who got good news and someone who just got news. He paused. Which one is that? She was quiet for a long moment. It's a kind offer, she said. My cousin means well. She always has. But she folded the letter neatly and slid it into her apron pocket. But I have been useful to other people's households my entire life, she said. And I am 25 years old, and I am... She stopped. Started again. I am tired of being the woman who helps. I wanted just once to be somewhere that was mine, to build something, to have a stake in something, to matter not because of what I could do, but because... She stopped again. Her jaw tightened briefly. Never mind. It's a good offer. I'll write back today. She stood up from the table. She's not Webb, August said quietly. Amelia paused. Your cousin is offering you another household to help manage, August said. Webb was offering you a partnership, a stake. He chose his words carefully. That man was a fool and a coward for not meeting you. But the thing you came here looking for, the chance to be part of something that was yours, that's not an unreasonable thing to want. She had her back to him. He could see the set of her shoulders, straight, controlled, contained. Does he have need of a ranch manager? She said. Someone who could handle the accounts, the garden, the domestic side as a paid position, not as charity, as employment. August looked at her back for a long moment. I think, he said slowly, that you would need to ask him that question yourself. She found Will at the south fence line just before supper. She had walked the full distance without allowing herself to change her mind, which she had needed to actively resist approximately 6 times along the way. He saw her coming and straightened. She stopped a reasonable distance away. I want to ask you something directly, and I'd like a direct answer. All right, he said. Do you need a hired manager for this ranch? Someone who could handle the domestic accounts, the household, the garden, the records and supply orders, as an employee, paid position, room and board. I would not expect I'm not asking for anything other than work and a fair wage. He looked at her. Because if you don't, she said, I understand that, and I will write to my cousin in St. Louis today and make my arrangements. But if there is a real position here that needs filling... She stopped. Her voice was steady, but she was watching him with an attention that was almost too careful. I am good at this work, Mr. Dawson. I know I haven't been here long enough to prove it to your satisfaction, but I would like the chance to try. He turned his hat in his hands. I haven't been looking for a manager, he said. I know, she said. I'm asking if you'd consider it. The evening light was long and golden across the field. Somewhere in the near pasture, a horse blew softly. "I have an obligation," he said. "I should tell you that. I've been in correspondence with a woman in Laramie, Margaret Hollis. We've been writing for some months. There's an understanding." She nodded. "I'm not asking about that," she said. "I'm asking about work." "I know," he said. I wanted to be clear about the situation, so there's no confusion about what I'm offering." "There's no confusion," she said. "I'm asking about work." He put his hat back on, looked out at the field, then back at her. "The ledger needs keeping," he said. "The kitchen garden needs a steady hand through summer. The supply orders are 3 months behind schedule. And August is not getting younger, and there's more to manage in the household than he can reasonably handle." He paused. "If you're asking whether there's work here that needs doing, the answer is yes." "Is that an offer?" she said. He met her eyes. "That's an offer," he said. She breathed once slowly. "Then I accept," she said. "And I want you to know." She stopped, and when she continued, her voice was very quiet. "I'm not going to be a problem, Mr. Dawson. I know what this is. I'm not going to make it into something else. I just want to work, and I want to earn my place, and I want—" She stopped herself. "I just want to stay." "Miss Carter," he said. She looked at him. "You don't need to explain yourself to me," he said. "You've already proven your value. The only thing I needed to know was whether you wanted to stay." She nodded once. Her throat moved. "I want to stay," she said. He held out his hand and she shook it, and the evening light fell over both of them, and neither one of them said anything else, and the silence was the kind that holds more than words can carry. The handshake lasted less than 3 seconds, but Amelia Carter carried the weight of it all the way back to the house, pressed flat against her palm, like a coin she wasn't sure she had the right to spend. She didn't tell August what Will had said. She didn't need to. When she came through the kitchen door, he looked at her face, and then he looked away with the careful expression of a man who already knows the answer to a question he never asked out loud. "There's soup on," he said. "Thank you," she said. She sat down at the table, and she ate the soup, and she did not examine what she was feeling too closely, because she had learned a long time ago that certain things survive better when you don't look directly at them. She started on the ledger the next morning. Will had left it on the kitchen table without saying anything, just set it there before he went out. A thick, battered book with a cracked spine and 4 years of entries that wandered between organized and chaotic, depending, she suspected, on what kind of season Will had been having at the time. She opened it and started reading from the beginning. By mid-morning, she had a cup of cold coffee at her elbow and 3 pages of notes and the specific kind of focus that came over her when a problem had revealed its own internal logic. The errors were, as she'd suspected, mostly transcription numbers entered in the wrong column dates out of sequence 2 full months of cattle records that appeared to have been entered in the wrong year entirely. August came in around 10, looked at her notes, and sat down across from her. "Bad," he said. "Not bad," she said. Confused. "There's a difference." She tapped a page near the middle of the book. "He's been recording head count in the revenue column. Look, he's been doing it for 2 years without noticing." August looked. "Lord," he said. "It means his actual revenue figures for the last 2 years are artificially inflated. He thinks the ranch is doing better than it is." She paused. "Or he knows something is wrong but can't find where." "He knows something's wrong," August said. "He just doesn't know what." She looked at the ledger for a moment. "How far behind is he on the Harmon supply account?" August was quiet for slightly too long. "August." 4 months, he said. "Maybe 5. She sat back. "Does he know that—" "He knows he owes them money," August said carefully. "He may not know the exact figure." She looked at the ledger again. Then she picked up her pencil and kept working. She had the errors mapped and color-coded by noon. She was considering how to present this to Will, not the discovery itself, which was straightforward, but the fact that the ranch's financial position was somewhat worse than he'd been calculating when she heard a horse in the yard and then a voice she didn't recognize. A woman's voice, clear and confident with the particular projection of someone who was accustomed to being heard. She stayed at the table. August went to the door and she heard him say, "Miss Hollis, we weren't expecting you." The name landed in Amelia's chest like a stone dropped in still water. Margaret Hollis. She heard the door open wider. She heard boots on the porch steps lighter than Will's, more deliberate. And then Margaret Hollis came through the kitchen door and stopped when she saw Amelia sitting at the table with the ledger open in front of her. She was. Amelia noticed this the way you notice anything you hadn't prepared for beautiful. Not in a complicated way. In a simple, natural way that required no effort and offered no apology. Dark hair, fine features, a green traveling dress that had been made by someone who knew what they were doing. She was perhaps 30, perhaps a few years older. She had the eyes of a woman who understood a situation quickly. She looked at Amelia. She looked at the ledger. She looked at August. "Who is this?" she said. "Miss Amelia Carter," August said. "She's the ranch manager, Miss Hollis. She came from Cincinnati." Margaret Hollis looked at Amelia again. Her expression did not change exactly, but something shifted behind it. "I see," she said. Amelia stood up because it seemed the right thing to do. "Miss Hollis, Mr. Dawson didn't mention you'd be visiting today." "I didn't tell him," she said. "I was in Prosperity Creek on other business. I thought I'd stop." She was still looking at Amelia with that same careful attention. "Ranch manager," she said, as though testing the phrase for weight. "Yes, ma'am." Margaret set her gloves on the counter. "Since when does Will have a ranch manager?" "Since 9 days ago," Amelia said. There was a brief silence. Then Margaret pulled out a chair across from Amelia and sat down. "Sit down, Miss Carter," she said. "Tell me about yourself." It was not an unkind invitation, but it was not quite a friendly one either. It was the invitation of a woman who intends to understand a situation and has decided that the most efficient path is directness. Amelia sat down, and she told her the stagecoach, the letter, the wrong ranch, the gate with Dawson burned into the crossbeam. She told it plainly and without embellishment, because this was not a story that required embellishment to be remarkable. When she finished, Margaret was quiet for a long moment. "And now you're staying," she said. "I'm working," Amelia said. "It's not the same thing." Margaret looked at her with an expression that was difficult to read. "No," she said slowly. "I suppose it isn't." Will came in for the noon meal and found both women at the kitchen table. He stopped in the doorway. Amelia watched him read the situation in approximately 1 second, the way his gaze went from Margaret to her and back to Margaret, and the almost imperceptible adjustment of his expression that said he was deciding how to handle this. "Maggie," he said, "I didn't know you were coming." "I know you didn't," she said pleasantly. "I've been getting acquainted with your ranch manager." Something flickered across his face. "She told you." "Miss Carter told me everything," Margaret said. "She's very direct. I appreciate that in a person." She stood and smoothed her dress. "Walk with me, Will. I'd like to talk." They went out. Amelia stayed at the table and did not look out the window. August appeared from wherever he'd been making himself scarce and poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of her without a word. She picked it up and drank it. "She's not what I expected," Amelia said finally. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Something easier to dislike." She looked at her coffee cup. "She's smart. She's kind. She asked good questions." She paused. "She's everything a man in Will's position should want." August didn't say anything. "That's fine," Amelia said. "It's fine. I'm the ranch manager. That's what I agreed to. That is the entirety of what I am here." "Miss Amelia, I'm going to finish the ledger," she said, and picked up her pencil. She heard them come back 20 minutes later. She didn't hear what they'd said to each other out there. She didn't try to, but she heard the quality of the silence when they came through the door. Not tense, not cold, but the particular quiet of 2 people who have reached some kind of understanding that has cost them both something. Margaret stopped beside the table. "Miss Carter," she said. Amelia looked up. "I hope you'll be comfortable here," she said. And she meant it. Amelia could tell she meant it, which made it somehow both better and worse. "Will speaks of practical arrangements. I think that's sensible." "Thank you, Miss Hollis." Margaret picked up her gloves. She looked at Will once briefly with an expression Amelia couldn't fully decode. Then she went out, and a few minutes later, they heard the horse. Will stood at the counter with his back to the room. "She seems like a good woman," Amelia said carefully. "She is," he said. He didn't turn around. "She always has been." The silence stretched. "The ledger has some problems," Amelia said. "I'd like to go over them with you this evening if that's all right. Some of the figures need your attention." He turned around. He looked at her for a moment, not with anything she could name, just with that particular attentiveness she'd noticed in him, the way he gave his full focus to things without making a performance of it. "All right," he said. "This evening." 1. She showed him after supper. She'd laid it out as clearly as she could, the transposition errors, the column confusion. The months entered in the wrong year. She showed him where the numbers should have been, and where they'd ended up instead, and what his actual revenue position looked like once the errors were corrected. He looked at it for a long time without saying anything. "The Harmon account," he said finally. "Yes," she said. "I think you owe them closer to 6 months than 4. He sat back. He picked up his coffee cup and put it back down without drinking from it. "How bad is it?" he said. "It's manageable," she said. "But you need to know what it actually is before you can manage it." She slid a paper across the table, her summary written in her neat hand. "These are the actual figures. This column is what you've been recording. This one is what the records should show." He looked at the paper. She watched his eyes move down the columns, watched the slight tightening around his jaw that said he was absorbing something unpleasant and was not going to make a scene about it. "How long would it take you to correct the ledger?" he said. "I've already started," she said. "2 more days, maybe 3. I want to check it twice." He nodded slowly. "There's one more thing," she said. He looked up. "The north fence line." She pulled out another paper, a sketch she'd made from memory after walking that section of the property. "The Harpers are running cattle through there. Not just crossing, grazing. If they've been doing it all season, you're losing grazing land you've already paid for to feed somebody else's herd." Will looked at the sketch. "How do you know it's the Harpers?" "I don't know with certainty," she said. "But the breaks in the fence line are on the side facing their property, not yours. And the boot prints near the broken posts are large. Your hired men wear smaller boots, I checked." He stared at her. "You checked their boot prints," he said. "I notice things," she said simply. He was quiet for a moment. Then very slowly something crossed his face that might have been the beginning of a smile, except he suppressed it before it became one. "Miss Carter," he said. "Mr. Dawson. I hired you to manage the household accounts and the garden. I know. You've corrected my ledger, repaired my irrigation, reorganized the tack room, and mapped evidence of cattle trespass. The garden is also looking better," she said. "I added shade cloth to the tomato bed." He looked at her. He picked up his coffee cup again. This time he drank from it. "Thank you," he said, "for all of it." She gathered her papers. "I'll finish the ledger by Friday. If you want, I can draft a letter to the Harmon Supply Company about the account. A payment schedule to propose." "Yes," he said. "Do that." She stood to go. "Miss Carter," he said. She stopped. "What you said earlier, about Margaret." He was looking at the table, not at her. "I want you to know the arrangement between us is not settled. She came today because she had questions. I think she has more." He paused. "I'm not telling you this for any particular reason. I don't want you to think something is decided that isn't." She held very still for a moment. "That's between you and Miss Hollis," she said. "It has nothing to do with my work here." "I know," he said. "I know that." He looked up. "I'm telling you anyway." She met his eyes for one moment, just one, and then she said, "Good night, Mr. Dawson," and went upstairs. She sat on the edge of her bed in the dark for a while with her hands in her lap, and she told herself very firmly and very specifically that she was not going to make anything of that. She told herself that she was 25 years old, and she had a job and a room, and 3 square meals, and that was more than she had gotten off the stagecoach with, and that was the entirety of what she was going to feel. She was almost convinced by the time she fell asleep. The next morning, Prosperity Creek came to her. She was in the garden when she heard the gate, and she looked up and saw 2 women coming up the path with the purposefulness of people who have decided something in advance. She recognized neither of them. The taller one had a covered dish. The shorter one had a face like a verdict. She stood up and brushed the dirt from her hands. "Good morning," she said. "Good morning," said the taller one, who had the warmth of a person who leads with kindness. "You must be Miss Carter. I'm Clara Weston. My husband runs the feed store in town. And this is Gertrude Pruitt," said the shorter one, who had not been waiting for an introduction. She was looking at Amelia with an expression she probably thought was neutral, but was not. "We heard you'd settled in at the Dawson place." "I'm employed here," Amelia said. "Yes, employed," Gertrude repeated. "Interesting word." "It's accurate," Amelia said pleasantly. Clara pushed the covered dish forward. "I brought a pie, apple. It's Will's favorite, and I thought—" "That's very kind," Amelia said. "Would you like to come inside?" She put the pie on the counter and made coffee and let them sit at the kitchen table, because her aunt had raised her with the understanding that you give people hospitality first and let them reveal themselves at their own pace. Clara talked warmly and asked genuine questions about Cincinnati, about the journey, about how she was finding the territory. Gertrude watched Amelia with the focused attention of a woman compiling evidence. "It must have been a shock," Clara said, "to arrive and find Mr. Webb had gone." "It was unexpected," Amelia said. "And then Will just took you in," Gertrude said. She said it lightly, but the lightness was a covering over something harder. "He offered employment," Amelia said. "I accepted it." "Of course." Gertrude smoothed her sleeve. "Only you have to understand, in a town this size people talk. And Will is a well-regarded man here. People take an interest." "That seems natural," Amelia said. "And there's the matter of Miss Hollis," Gertrude said. "She was here yesterday, I understand." She understood, Amelia noted very quickly. "She was," Amelia said. "She's from a good family. The Hollis family has land in 3 counties. She and Will have an understanding." "So I've heard," Amelia said. "I just think—" Gertrude stopped, started again. "I think it would be difficult, for everyone, if certain lines were unclear." There it was. Amelia set down her coffee cup. She looked at Gertrude Pruitt with the calm, clear attention of a woman who has heard this particular message many times, in many forms, and has learned that the most powerful response is complete stillness. "Mrs. Pruitt," she said, "I appreciate your concern. I am here to work. I am doing work that this ranch needs done, and I'm doing it well, and I am being compensated for it. There is nothing unclear about my position or my purpose." She paused one beat. "I hope that settles the matter." Gertrude opened her mouth. "More coffee," Amelia said. They left 40 minutes later. Clara with genuine warmth and the promise to return Gertrude with the specific expression of a woman who has not gotten what she came for and intends to think about why. August appeared and stopped beside Amelia in the yard. "That was Gertrude Pruitt," he said. "I know. She runs the social calendar of this town like a military operation." "I noticed. You held your own." "I always do," she said. She picked up her garden trowel and went back to work. The trouble came on a Thursday. She was at the supply store in town. Will had asked her to handle the Harmon account meeting, which she had prepared for with 2 pages of notes and a proposed payment schedule. She was quietly confident was reasonable when she heard Cole Harper's voice from the back of the store. She had come in through the front, and he was near the back talking to the Harmon brothers, and she had walked into his sentence already in progress. Tell you that woman is running that ranch now. Will doesn't know which end is up. She's got him turned around so completely he can't see straight. She stopped. She heard one of the Harmon brothers say something too low to catch. She came out there under false pretenses, Cole said. Webb's arrangement or not, she maneuvered herself into that house and she's not leaving. You mark me. The floorboard under Amelia's boot was old, and it creaked when her weight shifted. Cole turned. For a moment they just looked at each other. Miss Carter, he said with the easy smile of a man who isn't embarrassed because he doesn't believe he said anything wrong. Mr. Harper, she said. She turned to the counter where Henry Harmon was watching with the wariness of a man who wants no part of whatever this is. Mr. Harmon, I'm here on behalf of Mr. Dawson regarding the supply account. I have a payment proposal when you have a moment. I've got a moment, Henry Harmon said, and came around the counter with the speed of a man grateful for an exit. She presented the proposal. Henry Harmon read it, looked up at her and read it again. He agreed to the first 2 payments on the spot and said he'd need to talk to his brother about the third. She shook his hand and thanked him. She was almost to the door when Cole Harper spoke again. You're good at this, aren't you? He said. Not a question. Something else. She turned around. At what? She said. Making yourself useful, he said. Making yourself hard to remove. He tilted his head. It's smart. For a woman in your position. Got to make yourself necessary before anyone notices you don't belong. The store was very quiet. She looked at Cole Harper for a long moment. She thought about several things she could say. She chose the one that was true and would cost him the most to hear. I have a signed employment agreement. She said a corrected ledger that saved Mr. Dawson 2 seasons of miscalculated revenue, a repaired irrigation line that's currently watering 40 acres, and a supply account payment plan that Henry Harmon just agreed to in writing. She paused. What is it that you've done this week, Mr. Harper? Cole Harper's smile didn't move, but something behind his eyes shifted. Good day, she said, and walked out. She made it halfway down the main street before her hands started shaking. She pressed them flat against her skirt and kept walking. She didn't tell Will about the supply store. She told him the Harmon meeting had gone well, which it had. She gave him the agreement, and he read it, and looked up at her with an expression that said he was doing some kind of arithmetic in his head about her. You did this in 1 meeting, he said. I came prepared, she said. He set the paper down. Miss Carter, what do you want from this? She blinked. From the account. From this. He gestured a small motion that seemed to include the kitchen, the ranch, and possibly several miles of fence line. You're doing the work of 3 people, better than those 3 people were doing it, and you're asking for wages that are below what you could command in any city that knew what you were worth. She looked at him steadily. I told you what I wanted when I asked to stay. I want to earn my place. I want to be part of something. That's not an answer, he said. Mr. Dawson. Will, he said. She stopped. He seemed briefly surprised that he'd said it. If you're keeping my ledger and negotiating my debts, he said, you can call me Will. She was quiet for a moment. What I want, she said carefully, is to do work that matters. To be somewhere that I might be here next year and the year after, and to know that my being here made a difference to something. She looked at the table. That's all. That's the whole of it. He was quiet for so long she started to wonder if she'd said something wrong. All right, he said finally. All right. All right, he said. You have that. I'm telling you, you have that. She nodded. She gathered her papers. She went to the door. Amelia, he said. She stopped. It was the first time he'd used her name. She knew it was the first time because she had been without meaning to, without admitting it, paying attention. Thank you, he said, for the Harmon account and the ledger and everything. She looked at him over her shoulder. His face was exactly what it always was. Weathered, quiet, direct, but there was something in his eyes that she couldn't look at for too long without feeling like she was doing something dangerous. "You're welcome, Will," she said, and went upstairs before she could do anything she'd regret. The second letter from Margaret Hollis arrived on a Saturday. It was addressed to Will. Amelia only knew it had come because August mentioned it with the casualness of a man who knows he is delivering information and wants it to land softly. "Letter came from Laramie," he said, setting it on the counter. She didn't ask. She went to the garden. She was there for an hour before Will found her. He came without preamble, just walked up and stood there with his hat in his hands, which she'd learned meant he was about to say something he wasn't sure how to say. "Margaret's coming for a visit," he said. "Next week. She'll stay a few days." "Of course," Amelia said. She kept her hands moving in the dirt. "I'll prepare the guest room." "You don't—" "She'll need a proper room," Amelia said. "The blue room is bigger. I'll shift my things." "You don't have to shift your things." "It's the reasonable thing to do," she said. "It's her visit. She should be comfortable." He was quiet. "Will," she said. And the name came out more naturally than she expected, which she noted with quiet alarm. "This is your house. She is your guest. I'm glad to prepare for her arrival. That is part of my job." "I know it's part of your job," he said. "I'm asking you not to treat it that way." She looked up at him then. She didn't mean to. She had been very carefully not looking at him because looking at him directly lately had become a slightly different experience than it had been 2 weeks ago. "What other way would you like me to treat it?" she said. He didn't answer. She went back to the garden. "Amelia," he said. She kept working. "I'm going to say something, and I need you to hear it the way I mean it, and not the way it might sound." She stopped. She sat back on her heels and looked at him. "All right." He turned his hat in his hands. He looked at the fence line. He looked back at her. "I think I made a mistake," he said. "With the arrangement. Not with you. With the way I described it. When I hired you, I said ranch manager. I said wages and room and board. And all of that is true, and I stand by it." He paused. "But I should have said I don't know how to say this without it coming out wrong." "Try anyway," she said. He looked at her steadily. "When I said the arrangement was practical, I meant it. But I didn't mean it the way it sounded. I didn't mean that you were only—" He stopped. "I meant that I needed you to know you were safe here. That I had no intentions that you hadn't agreed to." He looked at his hat. "I think maybe I was too careful. And I think you heard the carefulness and turned it into something smaller than what it actually was." She looked at him for a long time. "Margaret is coming," she said finally. "I know. You owe her honesty. I know that too." She stood up. She brushed the dirt off her skirt. She looked at him very directly because she had decided standing there in the garden with the afternoon sun on her face that she was done looking away from the things she was afraid of. "Whatever this is," she said quietly, "whatever is happening between us, I will not be the reason you break faith with a good woman. I will not do that, and I will not allow you to do it either. So if you have something to say it to her first. Say it honestly. And then—" She paused. Her voice was perfectly steady. "And then we'll see." He looked at her with an expression she had no name for. "Yes, ma'am," he said. She went inside. She went to the kitchen and pumped water and washed her hands very thoroughly, and did not stand at the window and watch him still standing in the garden with his hat in his hands. She went to the ledger and worked until supper, and when Will came in and sat across from her, and neither of them said anything about it. The silence was different from every silence that had come before. August made coffee. He set a cup in front of each of them. He sat down at the end of the table with his own cup and looked at neither of them in a way that made his feelings extremely clear. Amelia picked up her pencil and went back to the ledger. Outside, the summer dark came down slow and heavy, and the lamp burned between them, and the ranch was quiet, and somewhere out on the north fence line something that was going to be a problem was already waiting to begin. Margaret Hollis arrived on a Tuesday, and she arrived the way she did everything with quiet competence and no fanfare whatsoever. Amelia had the blue room ready. Fresh linens, a pitcher of water, the window cracked just enough for the evening breeze. She had moved her own things to the small room at the back of the hall the night before, doing it quickly and without ceremony, because the only way to do a thing that hurt was to do it before you had time to feel it. Will met Margaret in the yard. Amelia watched from the kitchen window just long enough to see the way Margaret touched Will's arm when she greeted him, easy and familiar, the gesture of a woman who has established her right to that small contact. Then Amelia went back to the stove. August came in and stood beside her. "She's pretty," he said. "I know," Amelia said. "I've met her." "Right." He was quiet. "You all right?" "I'm making supper," she said. "Yes." The meal was civil, more than civil. Margaret Hollis was sharp and warm, in equal measure, the kind of woman who could hold 3 threads of a conversation simultaneously without losing any of them. She asked August about the ranch's history. She asked Will about the cattle count. She asked Amelia with genuine curiosity about the ledger corrections. "You found the error in 2 days," Margaret said. "The errors had a pattern," Amelia said. "Once you see the pattern, the rest follows." Margaret looked at her thoughtfully. "What did you do in Cincinnati?" "Whatever needed doing," Amelia said. "Boarding house accounts, supplier contracts, correspondence. I've always been better with systems than with people." "I'd push back on that," August said from the end of the table. Amelia looked at him. "You're better with people than you think," he said simply. A brief silence. Margaret looked from August to Amelia to Will, and whatever she saw in that triangle, she filed it away behind those careful, intelligent eyes without saying anything about it. After supper, she helped clear the table. Amelia hadn't expected that. "You don't have to," Amelia said. "I know I don't," Margaret said, which was exactly what Amelia had said to Will on her first night, and the echo landed between them like something that didn't need commenting on. She heard them on the porch that night. She wasn't trying to. Her window was open, and the night was still, and voices carried differently out here than they did in the city. She didn't catch every word, but she caught enough. Margaret's voice quiet and direct. "Will, when you wrote me last month, you said you were considering the arrangement seriously, that you thought it was the right time." A pause. "I was," he said. "And now," a longer pause, the kind that has weight. "Maggie, don't," she said, not angry, just clear. "Don't start a sentence that way unless you intend to finish it honestly." Silence. "Something's changed," he said. "I don't know exactly what. I'm not saying it's her. I'm not saying anything definitive. I'm telling you something's changed, and I owe you honesty about that." Amelia pressed her hand flat against the wall beside the window. She made herself breathe. "I see," Margaret said. A pause. "Will, that woman in your kitchen has been underestimated by every person she's ever met. Don't make the same mistake twice in a row." Silence. "Go to bed," she said. "We'll talk more in the morning." Amelia moved away from the window and sat on the edge of her cot and pressed her hands together in her lap and sat there in the dark for a long time, very still, not allowing herself to draw any conclusions from anything she'd heard. She was the ranch manager. She was going to stay the ranch manager until she was no longer needed or no longer wanted. She told herself this with considerable firmness. She did not entirely believe it. Margaret left on Thursday morning. They had coffee together alone because Will was out early and August had made himself tactfully absent. Margaret wrapped both hands around her cup and looked at Amelia with the eyes of a woman who has made a decision and made peace with it. "I'm not angry with you," she said. "I want you to know that." She paused. "I came here expecting to see a situation I understood, and instead I saw something I didn't expect. A man who's been lonely for years and didn't know it. And a woman who's been invisible her whole life and is just starting to understand that she doesn't have to be." She looked at her coffee. "Will and I are well suited on paper, but well-suited on paper is not the same as... She stopped. I have enough self-respect to know when I am not the thing someone needs most. Amelia looked at her. You came here to end the arrangement. I came here to say what I said on the porch, Margaret said. What he does with it is up to him. She stood and smoothed her dress. You're better than you think you are, Miss Carter. Don't let this town tell you otherwise. She was almost to the door when Amelia said, Miss Hollis. Margaret turned. Thank you, Amelia said, for being the kind of woman you are. It would have been much easier to be a different kind. Something in Margaret's expression shifted. Yes, she said. It would have. She pulled on her gloves. Take care of him. He's not as uncomplicated as he looks. She went out. Amelia sat in the quiet kitchen and listened to the horse going down the road and thought about the particular cost of being a decent person in a situation that wasn't fair to anyone. Chut. The storm came 4 days later, and it came fast. August saw at first a wall of gray moving in from the northwest. He was in the yard when it hit the horizon and turned and shouted for Will before the first gust had reached the fence line. Amelia was in the kitchen garden. She heard August shout, looked up at the sky, and was already moving before she'd consciously decided to move. The east field, the irrigation coupling she'd repaired. If it failed under storm pressure, they'd lose water to the whole eastern section. She ran. She heard Will behind her, his boots on the ground, the rhythm of a man running with purpose, and she didn't slow down to wait for him. She knew where the weakness was. He didn't. She reached the irrigation line 30 seconds before he did, and had her hands on the secondary shutoff before he arrived. What are you doing? He said. The coupling can't handle surge pressure, she said, already working. I need to close the secondary valve and redirect to the holding tank until the storm passes. You need a wrench. I have one. She pulled it from her apron pocket. He stared at her for half a second. Then he moved past her to the far junction, bracing it by the time she had the secondary closed. Tank valve, she called. Got it, he called back. The first real gust hit while they were working, and then the rain came down like a curtain. She was soaked through in 30 seconds, and kept working. She heard Will moving along the line behind her checking connections, and she moved in the opposite direction methodically, the way you do a thing when panic is not an option. They met back at the main junction 10 minutes later, both drenched, rain running off the brim of his hat in a sheet. It'll hold, he said. It'll hold, she said. He looked at her, just looked in the rain with water running down both their faces, and then he said, Come on, and they ran for the barn. They stood in the dim warmth while the worst of it passed, both dripping, both breathing hard, the rain hammering the roof above them. Will found a blanket on the rack by the door and handed it to her without a word. She put it around her shoulders. You knew that was going to happen, he said. I've been watching that coupling since I repaired it, she said. I wasn't sure it would hold a surge. You've been watching it. I watch everything. It's what I do. I see things that are about to go wrong before they go wrong. She paused. My aunt said I made everyone anxious, always pointing out problems. You don't make me anxious, he said. She looked at him. He was leaning against the wall watching her, and there was something in his expression she'd been carefully not naming for weeks. Will, she said. Amelia. Don't, she said. I haven't said anything. You were about to, she said. And I need you to not. Not right now. Not when we're both soaked through and I can't think clearly. I need to be thinking clearly before any conversation happens that I can't take back. He was quiet for a moment. All right, he said. Thank you. He nodded. He looked at the rain past the barn door. She's gone, he said. Margaret, I want you to know she was the one who... I know, Amelia said. He looked at her. The window was open, she said simply. I didn't intend to hear, but I heard. He absorbed this. Then you know I know what you said to her, Amelia said. And I know what she said to you. And I know that whatever you're feeling, you were honest about it, and I respect that more than I can tell you. She pulled the blanket tighter. But feelings are not the same as decisions, and I'm not going to be a decision made in the middle of a storm. He looked at her for a long moment. I'll wait, he said. When you're ready to think clearly, I'll be here. You might be waiting a while, she said. I'm a patient man, he said. The rain kept falling. Something between them had shifted quietly without announcement, the way important things often do. The tomatoes are going to be a mess, she said finally. He let out a breath that was almost a laugh. Probably. They walked back to the house through the dripping dark, when the storm softened, not quite together, but close enough that it didn't matter, and August was on the porch with 2 cups of coffee and had the grace to say nothing at all. Yeah. The twist came the next morning from a direction Amelia had not expected. Henry Harmon came to the door just after breakfast, hat in hand, with the look of a man delivering uncomfortable news. There's a claim been filed, he said, against this property. 3 days ago with the county land office. Cole Harper's contesting the ownership of the north 30 acres. The kitchen went very quiet. He's claiming those acres were part of a verbal agreement his father made with your uncle back in 1871, Henry said. Claims it was never formally recorded but was understood to transfer to the Harpers on your uncle's death. He looked at Will. His lawyers from Denver. Filings already in. Amelia's mind was already moving. 1871. 14 years ago. Is there documentation? She said. None that I know of. Tucker's vouching for him as a witness. She looked at Will. His face had gone hard, and still the expression of a man deciding not to let his anger choose his next move. Where is your deed? She said. He stopped. Will, where is the deed to the north 30? It should be in the box in the study. She was already moving. He followed. The study. The wooden box on the shelf. He opened it on the desk. Letters. Receipts. Old correspondence. A surveyor's map. 2 supply contracts. No deed. She went through everything twice, lifting each paper and setting it aside in order. It's not here, she said. It has to be. It's not in this box. She looked at him. When did you last see it? I've never needed to look for it. My uncle's papers. He stopped. When he died, I put everything in this box. The Harpers were here 4 days ago, she said quietly. Tucker came in for water. He was in the house for 10 minutes. The study is off the main hall between the kitchen and the front door. Will went very still. I'm not accusing anyone, she said. I'm telling you what I see. The deed is gone. A claim was filed 3 days ago, and Tucker Harper was in this house last week. She looked at him steadily. Who's the county land clerk? Dalton Reese. Is he honest? Honest enough. Then we go to him now, she said, before Harper's lawyer does. Amelia. I'm coming with you, she said, and this time it was not a question. He looked at her for one moment, that look she'd learned to recognize, the one that meant he was seeing her, and then he said, Let's go. Chum. At the land office, Dalton Reese looked up when they came in, and had the expression of a man who had been expecting this visit. Will laid out the claim. Then Amelia set the surveyor's map on the desk. August had pushed it into her hands, before they left, along with the first cattle ledger entry, with the quiet instruction that evidence of continuous use was evidence of ownership. The 1869 survey shows the north 30 acres with continuous fence line and water access as part of the Dawson property, she said. And this is the first cattle record for that land, dated June 1869, in Will's uncle's handwriting. 16 years of continuous occupation and use. Dalton Reese looked at the papers. Tucker Harper was born in March of 1864, she said. He would have been 7 years old in 1871. His witness statement attests to a verbal agreement he allegedly witnessed before his 7th birthday. She looked at Reese steadily. I'd like to know whether his age was verified before that statement was accepted. Dalton Reese set the ledger page down very carefully. He looked at Will. He looked at Amelia. I'll need to review the filing in detail, he said. "We'll wait," Will said. 2 hours later, Reese had put a formal notation on the filing, a material factual inconsistency regarding Tucker Harper's age and capacity to attest to events in his 6th year of life. It didn't dismiss the claim outright, but it flagged it in a way that meant Harper's Denver lawyer couldn't move forward without answering it first. They walked out into the afternoon sun and stood on the boardwalk. "It's not over," Will said. "No," she said, "but it's slower, and we need to find the deed." She looked at him. "Cole Harper doesn't file legal papers unless he thinks he has a real chance of winning. He thought the deed was gone, which means he knew where to look or someone told him." Will's jaw tightened. "When we get home," he said, "we search the house properly." "August," she said, "ask August about your uncle's documents. He has a very precise memory." She started toward the horses. "And Will stop looking at me like that while we're still in the middle of a problem." "Like what?" he said. She looked at him over her shoulder. "You know like what." He almost smiled. "Yes, ma'am," he said, and followed her. August was on the porch when they arrived, and before Will had his horse tied, August said, "The trunk." They both looked at him. "The big leather trunk in the bedroom," August said with the expression of a man annoyed at himself. "Your uncle didn't keep important documents in the box. He put the deed, the water rights, and the original survey in the lining of the trunk. False bottom. I helped him put it in." He paused. "I should have told you 11 years ago. I assumed you knew." Will stared at him. "The trunk is still in the bedroom," August said. "I assume." Will was already inside. Amelia looked at August. "You should have told him," she said. "Yes," August said. "I should have. Go tell him the exact dimensions of the false bottom before he tears the trunk apart." August considered this briefly and went inside with some speed. The deed was there, folded inside an oilskin envelope flat against the false bottom, right where Will's uncle had put it in 1879. Date clear, signature clear, county recorder's seal clear. 30 acres purchased outright in 1868, transferred in full to William James Dawson upon the death of Robert Henry Dawson. Will set it on the table, and they all three stood looking at it. August said, "I'm sorry I didn't tell you sooner." Will said, "You're forgiven," simply without making a speech of it. Amelia picked up her pencil. "I'll copy it twice tonight. One to Reese in the morning, one to the Denver Land Registry." She looked at Will. "Cole Harper is going to have a very unpleasant week." He pulled out the chair across from her and sat down. "Then I'll stay up with you," he said. August picked up his coffee and went to his room with dignified speed. She worked for 2 hours. He stayed handing her candles when one burned down, bringing water without being asked, sitting across from her in the particular quiet of two people who have stopped pretending they don't know what this is. She set down her pencil just before midnight and looked at him across the table. "Will," she said. "Amelia." "I'm thinking clearly now," she said. "I thought you should know." He went very still. "I said I'd tell you," she said. "When I was ready." He looked at her with that expression she'd been afraid to name, the one that saw her, all of her exactly as she was, and found nothing there to look away from. "I know," he said quietly. "I heard you." She gathered the copied deed and set it by the door for morning. She stood up. He stood too. They were on opposite sides of the table, which was not very far. "The Harper problem isn't finished," she said. "I know. There's more going on than a land claim. Cole Harper has been moving toward something for months. The cattle on the fence line, the deed, the witness, it's organized. It's planned." "I know that too," he said. "We'll deal with it," she said. "But together. Not just you managing the range while I manage the accounts. Together." He looked at her. "You're not the ranch manager anymore, are you?" he said. It wasn't quite a question. She held his gaze. "No," she said. "I don't think I am. The lamp burned low between them, and outside the window the summer dark was wide and still and full of stars, and Amelia Carter, who had sold her mother's brooch for a stagecoach ticket and walked 4 miles in the heat to the wrong ranch and decided to stay anyway, stood in the amber light and understood for the first time in her life that she was exactly where she was supposed to be. "Good night, Will," she said. "Good night, Amelia," he said. She went upstairs. He stayed at the table until the lamp burned out. She didn't sleep right away. She lay in the small back room with her hands folded on her chest and listened to the ranch settle into the dark around her. The creak of old timber, the soft movement of the horses in the barn, the particular silence of a place that is alive even when it is quiet, and she thought about the word she'd used downstairs. Together. She had not planned to say it. It had come out of her the way honest things do without asking permission first, and now it was out in the world, and she could not take it back, and more to the point, she did not want to. She thought about the letter that had started all of this. Mr. Calvert Webb, rancher, seeking a wife of practical nature. She thought about the pearl brooch and the 11 days on the stagecoach and the 4 miles of road in the heat with a suitcase that got heavier with every step. She thought about the gate with Dawson burned into the crossbeam. She had walked through the wrong gate. She had arrived at the wrong ranch. She had met the wrong man, except that was not, she understood now, quite how it had actually gone. She closed her eyes. Outside the window, somewhere far out on the range, a coyote called once and went quiet. Tomorrow, there was a deed to file and a land claim to fight, and a man named Cole Harper who had made a serious mistake in underestimating both of them. She fell asleep thinking about that, and for the first time in a very long time, her last thought before sleep was not worry. It was something that felt cautiously and remarkably like hope. The deed reached Dalton Reese's desk by 8 o'clock the following morning. Amelia had been up since before dawn making the second copy, double-checking every word against the original making. Certain the county recorder's seal notation was transcribed correctly. Will had come down at first light, found her already at the table, and said nothing. Just went to the stove and made coffee and set a cup beside her without a word, the way a man does when he's stopped needing to explain himself. She rode to town with him. She didn't ask, she just got her coat. He didn't say anything about that either, which told her something. Dalton Reese took the deed with both hands and the expression of a man genuinely relieved to have the correct answer in front of him. He read it. He checked the date. He checked the seal. He looked up at Amelia. "I'll attach this to the filing today," he said. "Harper's lawyer is going to have a problem." "He's going to have several," Amelia said. "I'd also like to make a formal request that the land registry cross-reference this deed with any active claims filed against the Dawson property in the last 6 months. Not just this one." Reese looked at her. "You think there are others?" "I think Cole Harper has been planning this for longer than 3 days," she said. "I'd like to know what else he's been planning." Will looked at her from across the clerk's desk. She looked back at him steadily. Reese made a note. "I'll look into it," he said. They walked out into the morning sun, and Will stopped on the boardwalk and turned to her. "You think he's been building a case?" he said. "I think a man who hires a Denver lawyer and coaches his brother to lie about witnessing a verbal agreement as a 6-year-old child has been working on something for a while," she said. "The cattle on the fence line wasn't accidental. It was a test. He was seeing how you'd respond, whether you'd notice, whether you'd push back. And when I didn't push back hard enough..." "He moved to the next step," she said. Will was quiet for a moment. He looked down the main street of Prosperity Creek, the feed store, the barber, the general store, the small white church at the far end. His town. His territory. His life for 36 years. "I should have paid closer attention," he said. "To the fence line, to the ledger, to all of it." "You were running a ranch alone," she said. "You were doing what one man can do." "One man isn't enough," he said. He looked at her. "That's what I've been learning." She held his gaze for a moment. Then she said, "We should get back. I want to look at the water rights document August found in that trunk. If Harper's challenging the land, the water rights are next." He nodded. He turned toward the horses. Then he stopped. "Amelia." "Will." "When this is done," he said. "When the Harper thing is settled, and the ledger is straight, and the irrigation is solid. When it's all done." He paused. "I want to have a different conversation." She looked at him very carefully. "What kind of conversation?" "The kind where I say things I've been not saying for 3 weeks," he said. "And you either tell me I've read this wrong, in which case I'll accept that and we'll go on as we have been. Or—" He stopped. "Or you don't tell me that." She was quiet for a long moment. "All right," she said. "All right, you'll have the conversation, or all right, you think I've read it wrong." "All right, Will," she said. "All right." He put on his hat. He walked to his horse. And she watched him mount up with the particular care of a woman who is allowing herself just barely, just cautiously to feel the weight of a future that might actually be hers. The water rights document was in order. Better than an order comprehensive covering the Eastern Creek access and the underground spring that fed the holding tank, both filed with the Territorial Office in 1869 and renewed in 1880. Amelia spent 2 hours with it making notes, and by the time Will came in from the afternoon's work, she had a single summary sheet ready for him on the table. "Cole Harper can't touch the water," she said. "Even if he somehow made a case for the land, which he won't, the water rights are filed separately, and they're solid. The creek access is yours, regardless of any property boundary dispute." Will sat down and read her summary. "You understand water law," he said. "My uncle was a surveyor in Ohio," she said. "He talked about property law the way other men talk about weather. I absorbed it whether I wanted to or not." "You never mentioned your uncle." "I don't mention most things unless they're relevant," she said. He looked up at her. "Am I ever going to know everything about you?" She thought about this seriously. "Probably not," she said. "But you'll know the important parts." "What are the important parts?" She looked at him across the table. "I think you already know them," she said quietly. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then August came through the door, with mud on his boots, and the expression of a man who has seen something, and the moment broke clean. "Riders," August said. "North Road, 3 of them." Will stood. "Cole Harper," August said. "And 2 men I don't recognize, not his brothers." They came into the yard with a lawyer. 2 men with the look of hired hands being paid for their presence rather than their labor, and a thin man in a city suit who introduced himself as Theodore Voss of Voss and Calhoun Denver, with the practiced ease of someone who expected the name to have an effect. It had an effect on Amelia, just not the one he expected. She was standing on the porch when they rode in. Will was beside her. August was behind them. Cole Harper looked at her with that expression he always wore, contempt layered over assessment, and she had long since decided not to waste energy on it. "Dawson," Voss said. "I represent Mr. Harper in the matter of the contested north parcels. I believe you've been to the county land office." "I have," Will said. "Then you're aware the claim is filed, and the process is underway." "I'm aware the claim has a notation on it," Will said, "regarding your witness's age at the time of the alleged agreement." Voss smiled. It was the smile of a man who has heard objections before. "A minor administrative point. We're prepared to address it." He paused. "Mr. Dawson, my client is prepared to be reasonable. He's not asking for the full 30 acres. He's willing to discuss a settlement." "Mr. Voss?" Amelia said. Everyone looked at her. She stepped forward on the porch. "The deed to the north 30 acres was filed with Dalton Reese this morning. Original document 1868 purchase, 1879 transfer. County recorder's seal intact." She looked at Voss with the calm precision she gave to accounting errors and every other problem that required staying exact when other people were getting loud. "The water rights are filed separately with the Territorial Office. Mr. Harper has no claim to either. Voss looked at her, then at Will, then back at her, recalibrating the look of a man realizing the situation is not what he was briefed on. "And who are you?" Voss said. "Amelia Carter," she said. "I manage this ranch." "Miss Carter is not a party to this. She speaks for this ranch," Will said. Quiet and absolutely final. Cole Harper's horse shifted. He was looking at Amelia with an expression she hadn't seen from him before. Not contempt. Not easy cruelty. Something harder. Something that looked faintly like the beginning of actual concern. "The deed's been filed," Cole said. "Not to Voss, to Will." "This morning," Will said. "That deed was in a box in your study," Cole said. "I saw it myself 2 years ago, when your uncle showed me." He stopped. The yard went completely quiet. Cole Harper had just told them he had personally seen the deed. That he knew exactly where it was. That the claim his lawyer had filed asserting the deed couldn't be located was not ignorance. It was a calculation that the deed would be gone before Will thought to look for it. Voss closed his eyes for half a second, then opened them and looked at his client with the expression of a man whose morning had just become substantially worse. Will stepped off the porch. He walked toward Cole Harper's horse and stopped a few feet away and looked up at Cole with the quiet, deliberate attention of a man who has been patient a very long time and has just reached the end of it. "Get off my land," he said. Cole started to say something. "I'll give you until noon tomorrow to pull the claim," Will said. "If it's not pulled, I'm going to Reese with what you just said, and I'm going to ask him to send to Denver for a territorial judge. And I'm going to let that judge decide what it means when a man files a claim knowing the deed exists and counting on it not being found." He paused. "You understand me, Cole?" Cole Harper looked at Will. He looked at Amelia on the porch. He looked at August behind her. He looked at Voss, who was studying the middle distance with professional neutrality. Then he turned his horse and rode out. Voss straightened his jacket. "Mr. Dawson, my client and I will be in communication." He followed. The hired men went with them. August let out a long breath. "Well," he said. "He'll pull the claim," Amelia said. She was still watching the road. "He can't risk a territorial judge asking what he just said." "You think he'll let it go?" Will said. She turned and looked at him. "No," she said. "I think he'll let this particular approach go. He'll try something else." "What else?" "I don't know yet," she said. "But a man who's been planning this long doesn't stop because one strategy failed." She came down off the porch. "We need to understand what he actually wants. It's not 30 acres of grazing land. 30 acres isn't worth a Denver lawyer." Will looked at her. "What is it worth a Denver lawyer?" She looked at the fence line, at the distant shimmer of the creek, at the particular angle of the land rolling east toward the hills. "Water," she said, "or minerals, or right-of-way." She paused. "Does anyone know what's on the North 30 that makes it specifically valuable?" Will was quiet for a long moment. "The railroad," he said slowly. She looked at him. "There's been talk for 2 years," he said. "A rail spur through this county. The surveying party came through last spring. They were looking at routes through the north end of the territory." He paused. "The proposed right-of-way would run directly across the North 30. Amelia stood very still. "If Harper owns that land when the railroad comes through, he collects the right-of-way payment," Will said, "which on a railroad deal in this territory would be substantial," she said. "That's why he has a Denver lawyer." She looked at him. "Will, do you know who's doing the railroad survey?" "A company out of Kansas City, Meridian Rail." "Do you know anyone at the county land office who would have access to the survey route documents?" "Reese might," Will said, "or might know who does." "We need to see those documents," she said. "If the proposed right-of-way is documented, it proves Harper's motive. It turns this from a property dispute into something a territorial judge would take considerably more seriously." August made a sound that might have been admiration. "Miss Amelia," he said, "you think like a lawyer." I think like a bookkeeper, she said. Same principle. Follow the money until you find the reason. They went back to Reese the next morning. The claim had been pulled. Voss had filed a withdrawal notice before 8 o'clock, which told them Cole Harper had been on his feet before dawn making decisions. Reese handed Will the withdrawal with the expression of a man who has watched something interesting happen and is keeping his opinions to himself. I have a question, Amelia said, about the railroad survey, the Meridian Rail Survey from last spring, the proposed right-of-way route. Is that document on file here? Reese looked at her carefully. It's a preliminary survey, he said. Not a filed document, but the county commissioner has a copy. Does the proposed route cross the north 30 acres of the Dawson property? Reese was quiet for a moment that was 2 seconds longer than it needed to be. Miss Carter, he said slowly, I'm not in a position to discuss documents that aren't on my record. But if someone were to request a meeting with the county commissioner, she said, about a railroad right-of-way that might involve their property, that would be a reasonable thing to do. That would be very reasonable, Reese said. The commissioner's office is open Tuesday and Thursday mornings. She looked at Will. Thursday, he said. Thursday, she agreed. On the boardwalk, Will turned to her. How did you know to ask about the railroad? I didn't know, she said. I followed the logic. A Denver lawyer costs money. The only reason Cole Harper spends that kind of money is if the return is proportionally larger. 30 acres of grazing land doesn't justify it. A railroad right-of-way does. She started toward the horses. The cattle on the fence line was never about grazing. It was about establishing a usage pattern, showing his family had been on that land for years. Building a case for adverse possession, Will said. She looked at him. I'm not entirely ignorant of property law, he said. No, she said. You're not. You just haven't had anyone to think through it with. She paused. You've been managing everything alone for a long time. I know, he said. They rode back in the morning light, and somewhere around the second mile without planning to, they fell into an easy rhythm side by side, his horse and hers. Her pace matching his, the way it had come to do without either of them noticing. And it felt natural in the way that things feel natural when they've been quietly becoming true for longer than you realized. It was August who broke the quiet that had been building for days. He came to Amelia on a Thursday evening while Will was in the barn, sat down across from her at the kitchen table with his coffee, and said without preamble, I've been meaning to say something. Say it, she said. When you first came here, he said, I thought you'd be gone in a week. Not because you weren't capable. Because capable people come through this country all the time, and most of them keep moving. He wrapped his hands around his cup. I was wrong. You weren't entirely wrong, she said. I was planning to leave. I know. I watched you plan it. He looked at her. I also watched you stop planning it. And I've watched that man out there be more himself in the last 3 weeks than he's been in the 4 years I've known him. She was quiet. I'm not telling you what to do, August said. That's not my business. I'm an old man with strong opinions, and the good sense to keep most of them to myself. Most of them, she said. Most, he agreed. He stood up. He's going to say something to you tonight. I don't know exactly what. But I know Will Dawson, and I know the look he's had on his face for the last week, and I know what that look means. He picked up his cup. I just thought you should be ready. August, she said. He paused. Thank you, she said. For all of it, for the papers, for the coffee every morning, for knowing when to be in the shed and when to come out of it. He looked at her for a moment with the expression of a man who has seen a great deal and is not surprised by any of it but is occasionally still moved. You're good for this place, he said. You're good for him. He went to his room. She sat at the table alone for a while. Then she heard Will's boots on the porch steps. He came in and hung up his hat and poured himself coffee and stood at the counter for a moment before he turned around. She waited. I want to say something, he said. I know, she said. He came to the table and sat down across from her the way he did every night with the lamp between them. He looked at her. When you walked up my path 6 weeks ago, he said, I thought you were someone who'd made a wrong turn. I was going to give you water and point you north, and that was going to be the entirety of our acquaintance. I know, she said. And then you didn't leave, he said. And then I didn't want you to. He paused. I'm going to say this plainly because I don't know another way. Say it plainly, she said. I prefer that. He looked at her across the lamp. I love you, he said. I don't know exactly when that happened. Somewhere between the irrigation line and the ledger and the Harmon account, and the way you looked at Cole Harper like he was a math problem you'd already solved. But it happened, and I know it's true. The way I know when a fence line is straight, you just look at it, and you know. The kitchen was very quiet. She looked at him for a long moment. At his face, weathered and direct and more honest than any face she'd ever looked at, and she felt something open in her chest, something that had been closed for so long she'd forgotten it was there. Will, she said. You don't have to. Let me finish, she said. He went quiet. I have spent my entire life being the useful one, she said. The capable one. The one who fixes things and manages things and makes do and keeps going. And people have appreciated that. They've valued it. But they have never. Her voice was steady, but her hands were very still on the table. No one has ever looked at me and seen me the way you see me. Not the function. Me. She paused. I walked through your gate because I was tired, and I needed water. I stayed because this place felt like something I'd been looking for without knowing I was looking. And I stayed longer because of you. Because of the way you are quiet and honest and principled and patient. She stopped. I love you, she said. I have been trying not to for several weeks, and I'm done trying. Something in his face moved, something deep and serious and real. He reached across the table. He put his hand over hers. She turned her hand over and held it. There's something else, he said. His voice was quiet. Something I need to ask you. She looked at him. I know you came here for something practical, he said. A position, a purpose, a place to belong. I know what you wanted, and I know you've found it here. He paused. What I'm asking is whether you'd consider staying as something more than the ranch manager. She held very still. What's something more? He looked at her steadily. My wife, he said. If you'd have me. The lamp burned quietly between them. Outside, the summer dark had gone soft, the stars coming out one by one over the Colorado range. She thought about the letter that had started everything. The wrong ranch, the wrong man, the right place, the right person. Found in the last way she'd expected through the door she'd almost walked past. Yes, she said. It was a small word. It was the largest thing she'd ever said. He stood up. She stood up. They were on opposite sides of the table again, which was not very far, and he came around it and stopped in front of her close and looked at her with those steady, honest eyes. I should have said it sooner, he said. You said it, she said. That's what matters. He lifted her hand and held it, and she felt the roughness of his palm and the sureness of his grip, and she understood that this was what she'd come 1,000 miles for, across 11 days of dust and heat and uncertainty through a gate with the wrong name burned into the crossbeam. She'd come for this. She just hadn't known it yet. August, from the direction of his room, made a sound that was unmistakably a cough covering something else entirely. Will looked towards the hallway. Then he looked back at Amelia. Something in his expression broke open into a smile, the first full, unguarded smile she'd seen on him, the kind that changes a face completely. She smiled back. And it was, she thought, exactly what she'd imagined, and nothing like what she'd imagined, and better than anything she'd hoped for. We should tell him, she said. "He already knows," Will said. "I know he knows," she said. "But he'll want to hear it said." Will laughed a short, quiet laugh that felt like something long held, and finally released. "All right," he said. "We'll tell him." They went to August's door together, and Will knocked, and August said, "Well, it's about time," before Will had finished saying his name, and the three of them sat around the kitchen table until very late, with the lamp burning warm between them and the ranch quiet around them, and the wide, dark Colorado sky full of stars beyond the window, and for the first time in a very long time, none of them were alone. The news reached Prosperity Creek before they did. Amelia didn't know how. She never found out exactly whether it was August who let something slip at the feed store, or Clara Weston, who had sharp eyes and a kind heart and couldn't always be counted on to keep what she noticed to herself, or simply the particular alchemy of small towns where information moves through the air like weather. By the time she and Will rode into Prosperity Creek on the Thursday morning of their meeting with the county commissioner, people knew. She could tell by the way they were looked at. Not the old way, the assessing, doubtful, size her up and find her wanting way she'd gotten used to in the first 2 weeks. This was different. This was people who had heard something and were trying to match what they'd heard against what they saw, and finding that the two things fit together in a way they hadn't quite expected. Clara Weston came out of the dry goods store and waved at them from across the street with a warmth that was entirely genuine. Henry Harmon, passing with a loaded cart, touched his hat in a small, deliberate gesture that meant more than it looked like. Even Dalton Reese, when they came through his door on the way to the commissioner's office, looked at Amelia with something that had shifted in it, a new respect, steady and quiet, the kind you earn rather than inherit. Gertrude Pruitt was standing outside the church talking to 2 other women when they passed. She watched them go. She did not wave. But she did not look away with contempt either, and Amelia had learned enough about Gertrude Pruitt by now to understand that withholding contempt was for her a form of acknowledgement. "People are looking at us," Will said quietly. "I know," Amelia said. "Does that bother you?" She thought about it honestly. "It used to," she said. "People looking at me and seeing something they'd already decided about. That used to bother me a great deal." She paused. "This is different." "How?" She looked at him. "They're looking at us," she said. "Not just at me." He was quiet for a moment. Then he reached over briefly and covered her hand on the reins with his. Just for a moment. Just long enough. She didn't look away from the road, but she felt it. Felt it the way you feel something you've been waiting for without letting yourself name the waiting. Commissioner Aldous Grant was a broad man who had been in his position for 14 years and had developed the particular quality of men who have seen a great deal of human nature from behind an official desk, patient, skeptical, and harder to surprise than most. He looked surprised when Amelia laid out the railroad connection. She had brought everything: the water rights document, the 1869 survey, a copy of the deed, and the notes she'd made on Meridian Rail's known survey routes based on information she'd requested by telegraph from the Kansas City Land Registry 3 days earlier, a step she hadn't mentioned to Will because she hadn't been certain it would yield anything useful, and it had. The proposed right-of-way for the Meridian Rail spur ran directly across the north 30 acres of the Dawson property. The survey had been completed in March. The route had been provisionally approved in May. Cole Harper had filed his land claim in July, 3 weeks after a public notice about the rail project had appeared in the Prosperity Creek Gazette, a notice printed on page 4 in small type that most people, including Will, had not read closely enough to understand what it meant for their land. Grant looked at the documents for a long time. "Miss Carter," he said finally, "where did you get the Meridian Rail survey data?" "I wrote to the Kansas City Land Registry," she said. "Public record request. They sent the preliminary route documentation within a week." "You knew to ask for it." Once I understood what Harper was actually after. She said the survey data was the piece that would connect his motive to his method. Without it, it's a property dispute. With it, it's a fraudulent land claim filed for financial gain using a false witness and a stolen document. Grant looked at Will. Is the deed copy she mentioned on file with Reese? As of 2 days ago, Will said. Grant leaned back in his chair. I'm going to be direct with you, Miss Carter. This is the most completely documented property case that has come across this desk in 11 years. And it came across my desk because a woman who's been in this county for 6 weeks put it together from a ledger error and a boot print. He paused. I want to know who you are. She's my fiancée, Will said, and my ranch manager. And the reason Cole Harper's legal strategy fell apart in approximately 72 hours. Grant looked at Amelia with the expression of a man updating a previous assessment. I'm going to refer this to the territorial attorney's office, he said. But I want you to know this ranch's right-of-way position with Meridian Rail is solid. When the railroad comes through, it'll come through on Will Dawson's terms. Amelia sat very still for a moment. Then she said, Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Miss Carter, he said. This county has needed someone like you for a long time. Cole Harper came to the ranch 4 days later. He came alone, which was the first surprise. No brothers, no lawyer, no hired men. Just Cole Harper on a bay horse riding up the path at a walk hat in his hand before he'd even dismounted. Amelia was in the kitchen when August came to the door with his careful voice. Harper. She went to the window, looked, then she went to find Will. He came alone, she said. Will was already moving. She went with him. She stood on the porch and watched Cole Harper dismount and stand in the yard with his hat held at his side, a posture she had never seen from him before. He looked older than he had a week ago, like a man who has spent several days in a difficult conversation with himself and has not particularly enjoyed it. Dawson, he said. Harper, Will said. Cole looked at Amelia. She met his gaze without any particular expression. Miss Carter, he said. Mr. Harper. He looked at the ground, then back at Will. I want to say something, and I need you to hear it. I'm listening, Will said. I was wrong, Cole said. He said it the way hard men say things that cost them flatly directly, without embellishment, as though decoration would make it dishonest. I've been wrong for a long time about a lot of things, but specifically about this. The land claim was wrong. Tucker lying was wrong. Counting on the deed being lost was... He stopped. It was a bad thing to do. I knew it when I did it. I did it anyway. Will was quiet. The railroad money, I've been having a hard few years. The North herd's been failing. The water on my land's running low. The railroad felt like a way out of something I couldn't see another way out of. He turned his hat in his hands. That doesn't make it right. No, Will said. It doesn't. I know. Cole looked at Amelia again. Not with contempt, not with assessment. With something closer to honesty than she'd ever seen from him. I said things to you, he said. Things I said because you were an easy target, and I'm not a good man when I'm afraid. He paused. I'm sorry for that. Amelia held his gaze. The territorial attorney's office is going to want to talk to you, she said. That's not something I can change, but what happens after that depends partly on what you do now. Cole looked at her. What do you mean? I mean the railroad right-of-way is going through the Dawson North 30, she said. That's settled. But the Meridian Rail route has flexibility in its access road. The service road that runs parallel to the right-of-way, it could run through the Harper property instead of backtracking around it. She paused. That's a different kind of payment than the right-of-way, but it's guaranteed annual income from the railroad for as long as the line runs. Cole stared at her. You looked into this. I look into things, she said. He was quiet for a long moment. Why would you do that, after everything? Because this is going to be my county, she said. And neighbors who are desperate do desperate things. I'd rather you not be desperate. Will looked at her. She could feel it, that look, but she kept her eyes on Cole. Cole Harper put his hat on. He cleared his throat in the way of men trying to manage something they weren't prepared to feel. I'll be straight with the territorial attorney, he said. Tucker, too. I'll tell him to tell the truth. That's the right thing to do, Will said. Cole nodded once. He turned to his horse. Then he stopped. Dawson, she's... He didn't have the words for what he was trying to say. He looked at Amelia one last time. "You did good," he said. "Rough and simple and real. Bringing her into this place." He rode out. August let out a long breath from behind the screen door. "Well," he said, "I did not see that coming." "I did," Amelia said quietly. Will looked at her. "You thought he'd come." "I thought he might," she said. "Men like Cole Harper aren't evil. They're afraid, and they're backed into corners, and they make bad choices because they can't see another way. Give them a way out that preserves their dignity, and sometimes they take it." She paused. "Not always, but sometimes." Will looked at her for a long moment. "You gave him a way out." "I gave him information," she said. "What he did with it was his business." She went back inside to finish the bread she'd had rising since morning, and August caught Will's eye as she passed, and whatever moved between them in that look had the quality of two people acknowledging something that neither of them needs to say out loud. Go. The wedding was small the way both of them wanted it. Clara Weston helped with the dress, not a new one, because there wasn't time, and Amelia wasn't a woman who needed ceremony to feel the weight of a thing. But Clara had fabric and skill and genuine affection, and what she produced in 4 days was simple and good, and right, in a way that fancy things sometimes weren't. August stood up with Will. Clara stood up with Amelia. The Reverend Marsh, who was a practical man with a gift for saying important things, briefly married them on a Saturday morning in the small white church at the end of Prosperity Creek's main street, with about 30 people in attendance. Gertrude Pruitt was there. She sat in the 3rd row, and she did not smile, and she did not cause any trouble. And after the ceremony, she came to Amelia and said stiffly, and with the particular dignity of a woman correcting a private wrong, "You've done well for this community, Miss Carter. I misjudged you, and I want to say so." Amelia looked at her. "Mrs. Pruitt," she said, "thank you. That means something to me." She meant it. Because the people who'd been wrong about you, and admitted it, were harder to come by than the people who'd been right about you all along, and she'd learned to value both. Henry Harmon brought a gift, a new ledger, the expensive kind with good binding, because he was a practical man, and he understood what she'd done with the old one. Dalton Reese brought preserves. Commissioner Grant sent a note that arrived the day before, formal and brief and warmer than it needed to be. Clara cried during the ceremony. August did not cry, but his jaw moved twice in a way that was adjacent to it. Will held her hand through the whole of the Reverend Marsh's words, and when it was done, and they were husband and wife, he looked at her the way he always looked at her, with that full, unhurried, seeing attention that she had been waiting for her entire life without knowing what she was waiting for. And he said quietly, so only she could hear, "You walked through the wrong gate." "I know," she said. "I'm glad you did," he said. "So am I," she said. "Every single day." Tsat. The Territorial Attorney's Office concluded its investigation in the fall. Tucker Harper told the truth. He'd been 7 years old. There had been no verbal agreement. The whole story had been Cole's construction built over months with Tucker's reluctant cooperation. Cole received a formal censure and a fine that took him most of the winter to pay. No criminal charges. The territorial attorney determined that the fraudulent filing, while serious, hadn't resulted in actual property loss, and that the Harpers' cooperation warranted some leniency. The Meridian Rail Service road agreement went through in October, running along the eastern edge of the Harper property, just as Amelia had suggested to Commissioner Grant. Cole signed the agreement with Meridian Rail's representative without making any trouble, and the annual payment he received was modest but steady, which was what a man with a failing herd and low water needed more than a windfall. She heard about it from Henry Harmon at the supply store. She nodded when she heard it and went back to the supply order she'd been reviewing because it was good news and the outcome she'd hoped for, and there was nothing more to say about it. Will was waiting outside with the horses. She handed him the supply list, and he looked at it and said, "You added fencing." "The south pasture needs 2 new posts before winter," she said. "I marked which ones." He looked at her. "How did you know about the south pasture posts?" "I walked it last week." You walked the south pasture. I walk the whole ranch once a week, she said. August knows. I thought you did too. He stared at her. You walk the whole... It takes about 2 hours, she said. I go on Tuesday mornings while the bread is rising. He looked at the supply list. He looked at her. He shook his head slowly, and there was something in his expression she had come to love, specifically that mixture of exasperation and admiration, and something deeper underneath both that he never quite tried to hide anymore. Amelia, he said. Will, she said. I have been ranching this land for 15 years, he said. I know, she said. And you have been here for 4 months. I know that too, she said. And you know this ranch better than I do. She thought about this honestly. I know different things about it, she said. You know the land and the cattle and the seasons. I know the systems. Between the two of us, he said, we know everything. She looked at him. He was smiling that full, unguarded smile that she still wasn't entirely used to, that still did the same thing to her every time. Yes, she said. Exactly. He folded the supply list and put it in his pocket and held out his hand, and she took it, and they walked back to the horses in the October light. And that was how it was between them, practical and warm and easy, the way real things are when they've stopped needing to prove themselves. Winter came early that year. It came the way Colorado winters did. Suddenly, decisively, without much warning, dropping a foot of snow on the range overnight, and turning the world white and still before anyone had quite finished preparing for it. Amelia had been preparing for 3 weeks. The supply orders were in. The root cellar was stocked. The barn was properly insulated. She'd spent 2 days in September identifying the gaps, which Will had then spent 2 days fixing, with the focused competence of a man who liked having a specific problem to solve. The cattle records were current. The accounts were balanced. The south pasture fence posts were new. When the snow came, the ranch was ready for it. She stood at the kitchen window on the first morning of the snow and looked out at the white still world, and Will came up behind her and looked over her shoulder, and August came in from his morning chores, stomping snow off his boots, and said, Water trough's frozen. I already broke it. Thank you, August, she said. Root cellar latch is stiff, he said. I'll oil it today. There's oil on the second shelf in the supply shed, she said, behind the rope. He looked at her. He had stopped being surprised by this exact kind of thing approximately 2 months ago. Right, he said. Behind the rope. Will poured 3 cups of coffee. He set them on the table. They sat down together, all 3 of them, in the warm kitchen, while the snow came down outside. And it was, Amelia thought, sitting there with her hands around her cup, the most ordinary and the most extraordinary thing she had ever experienced. Ordinary because it was just breakfast, just coffee, just the small daily maintenance of a life shared with people who knew you. Extraordinary because she had not, for most of her 25 years, expected to have it. You're thinking, Will said. I'm always thinking, she said. You're thinking something specific, he said. You get a particular look. What look? Like you're counting something, he said. Adding something up. She looked at him across the table. I was thinking about the gate, she said. The first day. Dawson burned into the crossbeam. He waited. I almost didn't come through it, she said. I almost turned back to the road. I thought, wrong name, keep walking. She looked at her coffee. 2 more miles in that heat with that suitcase, and I would have gotten to Webb's empty property, and I would have had exactly nowhere to go and no way to get there. She paused. I almost kept walking. What made you stop? Will said. I was tired, she said. And I needed water, and... She paused. I had a feeling, not a mystical feeling. Just a feeling like when you're working through a ledger and something doesn't add up in the wrong direction. It doesn't add up in the right direction. Like the mistake was pointing at the answer, not away from it. Will was quiet. I've thought about that a lot, she said. About how close it was. 1 decision, 1 more mile. She stopped. Her throat moved. Will reached across the table, He covered her hand with his. "But you stopped," he said. "I stopped," she said. "And you came through the gate." "And I came through the gate," she said. August set down his coffee cup. He said, "am going to go oil the root cellar latch." He stood up with the specific dignity of a man removing himself from a tender moment while making it clear he approves of it entirely. "Don't mind me." He went out. Will looked at Amelia across the table. The snow was still coming down outside. The kitchen was warm. The lamp was burning, the same lamp that had burned between them on 100 evenings now, through ledgers and land claims, and hard conversations, and quiet ones. "I'm glad you stopped," he said. "I know," she said. "I'm glad you needed water." "So am I," she said. He turned her hand over in his and held it. "This is going to be a good winter," he said. She looked at him. "The snow came early," she said. "I know." "The north fence'll need checking by February." "I know that too." "And the Meridian Rail representative is coming in March to do the final survey walk. I'll need to prepare documentation for—" "Amelia," he said. She stopped. "It's going to be a good winter," he said. She looked at him for a moment, at the steadiness in his face, at the warmth in his eyes, at the way he held her hand like it was something worth holding. "Yes," she said, "it is." The following spring, a woman named Delia Marsh, the Reverend's niece, 22 years old, recently arrived in Prosperity Creek under circumstances not entirely unlike Amelia's own, came to the ranch looking for work. She was nervous, and she was capable, and she was clearly exhausted from pretending to be neither, and she sat at Amelia's kitchen table with her hands folded and her back straight, and said, "I was told you might need help with the household accounts, ma'am. I'm good with numbers." Amelia looked at her. She thought about a kitchen table in Cincinnati. She thought about a cot that groaned, and a pearl brooch, and a letter she'd read until it went soft at the creases. She thought about a stagecoach and 11 days of dust, and a crossroads sign that read, "Prosperity Creek 4 miles." "What else can you do?" she said. Delia blinked. "Ma'am." "Beyond the accounts," Amelia said. "What else do you know how to do?" Delia straightened slightly. "I can manage a garden," she said. "I understand basic construction repair. My father was a builder. I can cook, sew, keep records, and I read 3 languages, though I don't know how that's useful out here." "It will be," Amelia said. Delia looked at her. "Does that mean—" "It means come back tomorrow," Amelia said, "and plan to stay." She stood up and poured 2 cups of coffee and set one in front of the girl. "I'm going to tell you something before you decide. This is a working ranch. The work is real. The hours are real. Nobody here is going to care about anything except whether you do what you say you can do." She paused. "And nobody here is going to tell you you're less than what you are because of what you look like, or where you came from, or who you were before you walked through that gate." Delia looked at the coffee. Her jaw moved briefly in the way of someone managing something she didn't want to show. "That's all I've ever wanted," she said quietly. "I know," Amelia said. "I know exactly." In the evenings, sometimes when the work was done, and the kitchen was clean, and August had gone to his room, and Will was finishing the last of the day outside, Amelia would sit at the table with a cup of tea and look at the lamp burning quietly in the center of the room. She would think about the woman she had been on that stagecoach, pressed into a corner bench watching the landscape change, carrying a letter she'd memorized, and a hope she hadn't let herself name too precisely because unnamed hopes were harder to lose. A woman who had spent 25 years making herself necessary to other people's lives and had finally quietly decided to try to find a life of her own, not knowing yet that the life she was looking for was going to be waiting for her on the wrong side of the wrong gate, at the wrong ranch, at the end of a 4-mile road in the Colorado heat. She would think about all of it. And then Will would come through the door, and he would see her at the table, and he would come and sit down across from her, without needing to be asked, and pour himself coffee from the pot she'd kept warm, and just be there present, and steady, and entirely himself. And she would think this. This is what she came for. This is what the brooch was for, and the stagecoach, and the 4 miles of road, and the gate with the wrong name burned into the crossbeam. This is what it was all pointing toward. She had walked through the wrong gate, and she had found on the other side of it everything she'd ever needed. Work that mattered, a place that was hers, a man who saw her completely and loved what he saw, a life that fit her the way a life is supposed to fit. When you stop trying to make yourself smaller so other people can be comfortable. She had been underestimated her whole life. She would not be underestimated here. This was her ranch, her home, her family built, not from perfect circumstances or easy arrivals, but from the particular stubbornness of a woman who needed water and noticed things, and who, when offered a reason to give up, had looked at the gate and walked through it anyway. And that was enough. That was more than enough. That was everything.